Would you like me to introduce everybody that is here? First of all, I would like to apologize for Barb Mathern. She is our executive director of the Sunrise Mission here. She was not able to be here today due to illness. So I think it would be much better that she's not here versus bringing anything with us in a small confined area. I would like to introduce, this is Victoria Purvis. Victoria is the homeless and prevention specialist with NEMSCA, correct? No, director. And then Art Ohlrich, who is with our veterans, our VA clinic here, and is MSW?
LMSW.
LMSW.
Yep.
So, and then myself, I'm Vicki Densteadt. I work as the Alpena Public Schools McKinney Vento Homeless Liaison for the district, as well as the grant coordinator for 5 other school districts as well. They're in our consortium.
So my name is Victoria Purvis. I work for Northeast Michigan Community Service Agency. Collectively, we cover 23 counties and we have 33 programs. My homeless and prevention programs cover the 11 core counties. So essentially we cover from the Bridge down to Standish and then 75 East. So we have 11 counties. We do have a few other programs that I'm going to talk to you about today that are also under my housing umbrella. Formerly, we were under the Housing and Client Services Department at NEMSCA, and then a couple of years ago, we essentially rebranded for the Homeless and Prevention Services. And the reason for that is when we had identified as the housing department, we would have a lot of people coming in seeking actual brick and mortar housing building. And NEMSCA does not oversee any housing. We offer services to be able to get people off of the street and remain in housing. So any of you that have worked with housing at NEMSCA in the past, homeless and prevention services are essentially the same thing. So on the second page of this slide, you will see here a picture from 2 years ago of individuals that were sleeping in boxes. This month is Homeless Awareness Month. So November is Homeless Awareness Month, and we do a few events throughout the month through our service area to recognize those that are experiencing homelessness. So this is a picture from when they had slept in a box all night. They also did it this year. We don't have great pictures because it rained all night and half of them slept in their car. But nonetheless, we do have individuals experiencing homelessness that sleep in their car. They had called and said, can we sleep in our car? We're getting soaked. Some of them had tarps, some of them didn't. So we do have a few that slept in their car overnight. But they do all of this outreach and awareness off the clock on their own time, this homeless awareness. And so I encourage all of you to get active in the community during Homeless Awareness Month. It's every November. Randy McCauley at the Friendship Room organizes a walk for homeless. And this year we had that and we raised, I think it was like $2,000 or something. Art was there with us. Yeah. So, and all of that funding comes back to the community. We generally use that for motel vouchers. So any individual that's unable to get either into Sunrise Mission or Hope Shore Alliance for those that are survivors of domestic violence, we do utilize that funding towards that. So we are finally closing out the month of homeless awareness. But I will send out this group some information now that I have the emails and contacts, and make sure that you are all included on the homeless awareness next year. So how can we help? What can NEMSCA do? So the first thing we do is we locate housing. So we have a wide array of landlords that work with our program. And what that means for a landlord that works with our program is, one, they accept our funding, right? They accept our money. We have government money. They follow the rules. That's a big thing. The second one is that they have agreed to ensure that their houses, their rentals are safe and affordable. And so what that means is they receive a housing quality standard inspection list. Now, the city of Alpena has immaculate rentals comparison to our other 10 counties. And the reason for that is our city officials do these housing quality standard inspections on every rental in the city. So Alpena is really up there with the rest of the state as to the rentals that we have. And then the last thing is they make sure that their rent is within fair market rent. And that is set by HUD. So that is set by the Housing Urban Development. It's a federally funded program or entity, I should say. And so they ensure that rent is something that can be afforded by the median income household and ensure that we're not overcharging renters. So we have about 50 landlords in the county of Alpena that work with us right now, that they usually have a waiting list because it's hard to get in, but we do have great relationships and connections with them that they will call us and tell us that they have a 2-bedroom available, something like that. So that's one thing that we do. We locate housing. Second one, financial assistance. We pay for them to get into that housing. So we can pay the security deposit for them to move in. With the security deposit, we can pay 1.5 times the rent. The great thing about the security deposit program that we offer is when we pay the security deposit to the landlord, if the renter leaves the home in better or the same condition as when they moved in, when they move out, they get to keep that money. So they either get to use it for a down payment on a home, or they get to use it as security deposit somewhere else, or what have you. They get to use it. So it's kind of an incentive for the tenant to take care of the home that we've put them in. And then we also have the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It was formerly known as Section 8. That is a program through MSHDA, and we call that the Golden Ticket. And we call that the Golden Ticket because it's a lifelong rental subsidy that they can utilize in a housing stock of their choice. So it doesn't have to be the Alpena Housing Commission. It doesn't have to be Alpena Pines. They can live wherever they want in the state of Michigan, and MSHDA will cover 70% of their rent. The wonderful thing about this housing choice voucher is once they've completed a successful 12 months on the program, they can actually transfer that into a mortgage down payment assistance, and MSHDA will pay for their mortgage. We have about 1 successful case a year. It doesn't seem like a lot, but individuals that are experiencing poverty, it's much harder for them to increase their credit score, to maintain a budget, and for a lender to support the MSHDA program. So we have one lender that is actually not even in Alpena or the surrounding counties. It's in Lansing that works with us. So individuals that come to us that want to transfer this into a voucher, we have to work with Lansing. And so that can sometimes be a barrier, but it is something that we do offer and that we do support. And then the last one, support and advocacy. We do weekly home visits with the individuals. This is an incentive for the landlord to know that their home is going to be maintained, as well as an incentive for the renter. So we can offer case management up to 18 months. And what that is, the main outcome, the main goal is to ensure that they never return to homelessness again. So they're working with them, very basic things such as opening a checking account, writing a check, knowing where to send the check to the landlord so that when we're done paying, they know how to pay the rent. You wouldn't believe how many people come to us that have lived in poverty and they've never had a checking account. They've never written a check. They don't know how to pay their landlord. They don't know how to mail something out. They don't know how to get a stamp or an envelope. So just the very, very basic needs, we help to make sure whatever they need assistance with that is going to ensure that they don't return to homelessness, we help with. So very basic things all the way from that to making sure that they have and involved themselves in a community, because we know as humans that we need that interaction to be successful and stay alive and be happy and avoid depression and all of the things that can lead to poverty. So make sure that their kids are in a school, that they have school clothes, that they have food, that they have transportation to school, that they have transportation to work. All of those things. We want to remove every barrier that is up against them to ensure them success in their housing. The next page just goes over what our specific services are for those that are experiencing homelessness. So what homeless is someone that is living in a shelter, car, abandoned building, camper, tent, etc. It's someone that is outside, exposed to the elements. And that is different than a different definition of homelessness, which is at risk of homelessness. And so that term is used loosely. McKinney Vento can help with different things. The VA can help with different things for these individuals that are homeless. But for our categories of assistance, it's at risk of homelessness, and that's better known as doubled up or couch surfing. So staying with someone else. So those individuals that are either homeless or at risk of homeless, we can help with that security deposit, short-term rental assistance, and then that 18 months of case management to ensure that they don't return to homelessness again. The emergency shelter program, that one's a little touch and go depending on what our donations are from over the years. But with that, we can do up to a 7-night hotel placement. We do have one entity in Alpena that is still working with us right now. So we're okay. We do have a lot of other counties that either the hotels have been burned by our program, that our program are participants that we're serving, or they don't accept our delayed payments, et cetera. So we do have that program, but that one is quite a struggle to get individuals enrolled in. This next one, financial empowerment. This is what that I was talking about in the beginning that I cover under my umbrella. This is individuals, anyone that is seeking housing services or that is currently housed. So basically everyone qualifies for the financial empowerment programs. So this includes rental counseling, home buyer education, pre-purchase counseling, financial literacy, and foreclosure prevention counseling. So these are all free of charge to any individual in any of the 11 counties. We also do cover Aranet County with these specific financial empowerment programs. The number one thing that we get a request for is repair of their credit score. So they're going to buy a house, they need the pre-purchasing counseling, and so we help them repair their credit so that they can get a decent mortgage. So these are our financial empowerment programs. And under this umbrella is where we get them ready also for the Key to Own program, which is the Housing Choice Voucher to Home Ownership program also. The next page is our homeowner assistance program. This came to us in lieu of COVID. So you may have heard of some of the funding coming through that Biden had signed last year. This funding is available to all homeowners in the state of Michigan. We are assisting those within our 11 counties. There is a 4-month turnaround on a determination for this. So I encourage anyone that is at risk of foreclosure or behind in any of your taxes or insurance or utilities to apply as soon as you get that past due statement. Individuals that are past due in their mortgage, it can take it's like 15 to 18 months or something to actually get the foreclosure notice. So as long as you apply, the minute you're behind in your mortgage, you'll have a determination well before that foreclosure process starts. And as you can see, the income limits are fairly high comparative to some of our other programs. For a family of 4, it's $96,000 annual gross income that is eligible for this. So the only 2 requirements for this program is that you're facing a COVID hardship. And I will tell you, we will work anything into a COVID hardship to help individuals that are facing housing instability. And then the second one is you have to own your home. So you have to prove it with a deed or your homeowner's insurance, something to prove that you own a home. And opposed to some of the other governmental programs, this program does help with land contracts. So we are able to assist with land contracts. So here is the number and the website and the email if you know of anyone that is a homeowner and behind in any of these bills. And then finally, what I have been summoned here to talk to you about is some of the data that is in Northeast Michigan. So I let you know how to access us, what we can provide, and then here are the reasons that our programs exist. So I want you to take note at the upper left-hand corner. This is the data from 2021 because 2022 isn't over yet. So we only have 2021 data at hand. So right now, to afford a 1-bedroom rental, you have to work 62 hours a week at $15 an hour. That is what you have to work to be able to pay that. For a 1-bedroom. If you need a 2-bedroom, you need to make $19 an hour and you need to work 77 hours a week. So that just goes to show that individuals that are homeless, it's not because they don't have money or because they're a drug addict or because maybe they don't even live in poverty. I know a lot of individuals that make under $19 an hour that need to live in a 2-bedroom home, and it's just not affordable. So even with those HUD standards that they have delegated or decided that is not affordable to everyone. So if you're a single mom and you need a 2-bedroom for your child, you have to make the $19 an hour and work 77 hours a week to be able to afford that if you don't have a second income. So that's where a lot of our individuals that are in our community get stuck in that poverty cycle because they have to choose if they're going to pay their rent or if they're going to buy their food, or if they're going to buy Christmas presents in a couple of weeks. What are they going to do? What are they going to do with their money, right?
7 days.
Yeah.
Rental, is that a day or a week? 15, 18, or 19, 10? 2-bedroom.
So $19 an hour is how much they would have to make.
Okay.
Yep. So they would have to get paid $19 an hour, and they would have to work 77 hours a week to be able to afford a 2-bedroom in Michigan. So that's how individuals get stuck in this poverty cycle. It's impossible. I can't work 77 hours a week if I'm a single mom and I have a child at home. What do? I get stuck in that poverty cycle. If I don't have community, if I don't have a church, if I don't have friends, if I don't have family to support me, I get stuck in that, right? So I do want to show you there was an increase after COVID of individuals that were able to access housing. We're still trying to figure out why it's taking 10 days longer. But in 2020, individuals were homeless for 59 days before they found housing. And then in 2021, last year, it was 69 days. So we're trying to figure out what has increased that. But I can guess it has to do with the pandemic and illnesses and some other things. So just to show people are experiencing homelessness much longer than they had been previously. On the positive side, there are a decrease by 44% of those that are facing eviction between 2019 and 2021. And the number one reason for that is COVID. And there was fortunately a eviction moratorium, which halted all evictions. Thankfully, coming out of that, the moratorium has been lifted and landlords are able to evict right now. However, there have been more standards put into place. And so what that looks like is judges are giving renters the opportunity to request assistance from social services. So in a lot of the counties, right on the complaint for back rent, our phone number is right there on that court document. So they have a pre-trial, it's called, where the judge gives the opportunity to the renter to seek assistance in getting their rent paid instead of just going right forward into the eviction process. So that had not been a thing until COVID and the eviction moratorium. And now judges are having these pre-trials and trials before proceeding right to the eviction and kicking those individuals out. Yes, ma'am.
Let's say if I was a renter
Mhm.
and someone didn't pay their rent for 6 months because of COVID, it's almost like excuse from the government, and then I, as a renter, will never get that money back.
So if you're a landlord and you have a renter and they're not paying, they haven't paid you in 6 months, no excuse. They still have to pay it. They just can't be kicked out on the street.
So after that 6 months, they have to pay it.
They have to pay it anyway. It's always going to be their debt. It'll never be excused. We did have a program that we spent $500,000 just in Alpena County that went right to landlords to pay for those. Yep. Yep. So the tenant is still responsible. It was just the moratorium was so that individuals weren't kicked out on the street. We had some that were hospitalized and on event, and they couldn't pay their rent because they're in the hospital and they're unconscious. So it protected those individuals. With that program, while we're on that, we saw a lot of working class that came through that were shut down during COVID. So the program started March 2020 and went through June of 2022. So we were able to pay 18 months of back rent for individuals that were getting evicted, or that were behind in rent, I should say. They weren't getting evicted. So that was to pay the landlord for that tenant's debt. Now, the landlord, once the moratorium was lifted, they could still evict them. They could say, you know what, you haven't paid me in the last 18 months. NEMSCA paid all your rent. I don't want you here. They were able to evict after that moratorium went up into place. What the moratorium didn't cover were those that deliberately ruined the rental or that didn't follow the landlord's rules. It didn't cover any of those. It just covered those that weren't working and weren't able to pay their rent on time. So individuals that, let's say they just started the living room on fire and said, I don't care, not my problem, they could get evicted. So it was more for the non-payment of rent for individuals that were out of a job for COVID. So we saw a lot of waitresses, we saw a lot of hairdressers. So their restaurants got shut down, their businesses got shut down because all non-essential employees couldn't work. How are they going to pay their bills after that? That's where we came in and assisted.
Victoria, could you speak to at-will rentals that do not follow any federal programming?
Like that can evict for any reason?
Yes.
Yeah. So most landlords, they do have a lease in place. They have a contract so that the tenant understands what their responsibilities are and the landlord understands what their responsibilities are. Legally, a landlord can evict a tenant for any reason. They don't have to be behind in rent. They can be evicted for any reason that they like. However, when they're going before a judge, the judge generally drags their feet a little bit to ensure that they're not going to get evicted just because the landlord wants them to be evicted. What happens at that point is they call us and they say, I'm being treated unfairly, or I'm getting evicted. I just want to get out of here. I don't want this eviction on my record. We relocate them. We find them new housing that's going to suit their needs. And we get them out of there. But yes, we are actually the Fair Housing Center for the 11 counties in Northeast Michigan. We do have a HUD. We have 2 HUD certified counselors on our team that can address fair housing needs. But yes, there are a lot of landlords out there that try and get away with some things, but they can be evicted for any reason. Yes, sir.
If I'm a landlord or even a renter, and I call your office, how long before I get a hold of somebody that's going to be able to help me?
We have about a 3-day turnaround for individuals that are facing eviction.
Doesn't it take 6 months to evict someone?
Not usually, and it depends on which judge you get. And it depends on why you're getting evicted. You know, so if you're getting evicted and they say, I called NEMSCA and I'm getting them my income information and I'm getting this and this and this, the judge will usually say, okay, we'll schedule another date in a week. You need to have your documents in by then, kind of thing. So the judge really makes the call on all of that and how long. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Any other questions on that or anything? Yes, sir.
It just puts the landlord in. They have expenses too. So I guess, and I'm passionate about the homelessness and the evictions, but the landlords are, it's kind of a catch-22.
It is. It is.
You know, the landlords have expenses, so
that's why we had the funding from Biden that we were able to pay the landlords. So that, because what we didn't want to happen when we heard about all of this coming through, great, the renters get a pass, right? They're not going to get evicted. Are they ever going to pay their rent? Like, we've heard it all. But then we have the landlords that are coming to us and saying, hey, guess what, Victoria, I can't work with your program anymore because I'm going to lose my mortgage on this rental because I haven't had the income coming in to pay it. So now the landlord's not getting their income, right? They essentially lost a job because that's how they're paying. So this program came in where we could pay that landlord, say you're behind 6 months, and we could pay you for those 6 months so that it's not a cost burden to you. So everyone is taken care of. But yeah, I understand. The landlords are our clients too, essentially, because yes, we don't want individuals out on the street homeless, but we have not a lot of rentals in our area in Northeast Michigan. So we don't want to lose the one great landlord that we got that has 8 rentals, so we want to make sure that he's receiving his income too. So good question.
Did the number of rentals change with Airbnb becoming so popular?
That has been a hot topic lately, and we haven't seen that as much in Alpena as we have in like East Tawas is pretty bad with the vacation rentals. They'll tell us that they'll rent to us in the winter, but they're not renting to us in the summer kind of thing. Alpena, we haven't really run into that problem. I don't know if the market that we're seeking to rent from with those kind of landlords. But no, we haven't seen that too much. So we haven't been affected by it yet, knock on wood. But some other communities have, and we know that that's a problem. It's also a problem when they only want to rent to us temporarily because we want individuals to secure a home. We just, we don't want them to be homeless in May when the weather gets warm and they want to use their Airbnb. So no, we haven't seen that. Anything else? Okay, I'll be here if any other questions come up.
Yeah, I'm sure some of how we interconnect with each other will be a part of that too. So. Hey, Art.
I'm going to hide behind my chair a little bit so I have something to lean on. But I've been with the VA. I'm in my 12th year right now. And my official title is Healthcare for Homeless Veterans Case Manager. And that pretty much describes the primary goal of the program, and that is to identify veterans who are not getting healthcare with the VA, who are eligible, and see if they are interested, and if they are, try to help get them enrolled in the healthcare program. And the reasons why they might not be involved is it might just be a matter of transiency. A lot of veterans move around a lot, especially your combat veterans. They struggle with anxiety. They'll be in one community or state. Next thing you know, they're in another one. And sometimes it's very impulsive. So it might be a matter of just filling out a brief 1.5-page form, updating the information and getting the records transferred from one VA location to where we are here. The VA is currently working on a new system where any VA site will have access to their records, but they're running into problems, so it's being delayed. Other reasons for possibly not being in the healthcare system is not knowing that they're eligible. The rules have changed over the years. Prior to September 7th of 1980, all you needed was 1 day of active duty service to be eligible for healthcare. It changed in September 80, September of 80, under the original Bush administration, to now you have to have 2 years of active duty service or have served an active duty tour and completed that tour. So a lot of your people who are National Guard or reserves might go off, get called up to war and spend a tour or two. They are eligible when they get back automatically for 5 years. And then if they have other issues, healthcare that's caused by or made worse by their service, they can continue. Otherwise, it's based on income. So sometimes people aren't aware that they're eligible. So we cross that bridge first. And if they are eligible and they're not in and they're interested, that's my first goal. And if they're homeless, I work primarily with the community resources. The VA does not want to be a landlord per se. So most of my counties, in fact, all of my counties that I cover are covered by NEMSCA. So they're my primary go-to. My coverage area is just slightly less south of hers. I used to have Standish, Aranet County, but now the farthest south I go is Iosco and West Branch, which is Ogama County. And if you follow the corridor of I-75, everything northeast of that is mine, with the exception of Sheboygan. That was mine once too. So the counties are pretty much similar. What the VA does do to try and help support housing needs is provide funding. There's a couple of programs that are utilized in the area. One of them is called Supportive Services for Veteran Families. And that was my first goal when I came on 12 years ago, was to sell that program to this area because nobody was accessing those funds. So the very first year, it was NEMSCA and Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency went together and applied for those funds. And after that, Northwest changed their name to Northern Michigan Community Action Agency, and they are still operating this program for that entire territory. What that program does is offer monies for initial security deposits and short-term rent assistance, usually anywhere from 1 to 5 months, depending on needs and income. After that, we try to get them into one of the long-term programs. The Section 8 that was just mentioned is one of those programs that the VA has a certain number of those promises to pay by the government, vouchers as they refer to them, Section 8. They're called HUDVASH. It just stands for Housing and Urban Development, Veterans Assisted Supported Housing. And the only difference between that and the civilian version is the VA steps in and acts as case manager. After that voucher is awarded, instead of having a civilian case manager, they would have a VA case manager who visits them once a month and make sure that everything's going okay. They're there more or less to be a support, help them work through difficulties with landlords, help them with other needs that they struggle with to maintain independence. It might be food. It might be keeping their vehicle on the road, getting to their healthcare appointments. And that's a big issue with the healthcare issue. Is veterans, if they're struggling, often don't have a vehicle, or they're living somewhere out in the middle of nowhere and have a hard time getting to their healthcare appointments. That's something that still needs a lot of work. The VA does have systems. There's a VA shuttle bus here that can get people down to Saginaw. Then there's other shuttles that can get them to VA facilities in Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids if needed. But it's getting to those pickup points. We have pickup points here in Alpena, Gaylord, Standish. But we have to try to find other volunteers, the County Veteran Service Office or other agencies, to get them sometimes to those points. Spot here. I want to kind of build on something that Victoria had mentioned in the different reasons for homelessness. With the veterans I work with, a lot of times I find it is paperwork overwhelms them. Especially if they are a combat veteran coming back, they have a lot of things going on emotionally, and someone throws a stack of paperwork to sign in front of them. It's overwhelming. They sometimes struggle with organizational skills, especially if they are dealing with PTSD or traumatic brain injury. So I might sit down and help them fill that packet out, or I might communicate with Victoria or her staff and say, hey, if you got someone, could they help them out with that? Sometimes it's a matter of asking someone, do you know how to read? We still have people in this day and age that don't read well or don't read at all. I've had veterans who made more money than me and were homeless. And often it is the older veteran who had a traditional marriage. And I don't want to sound sexist, but they came home, gave the check to the wife. She handled everything. Something happens. She passes away or leaves him. And they don't know that they can make it on their own. I had a gentleman, I started finding out about his income, and I'm taking him across the state to Patriot Place, which I will discuss a little bit more in a bit. And as I'm getting there, I'm realizing more and more he's making a lot of money. By the time I get there, he's making more money than me or the people interviewing him there. He just didn't have the confidence that he could organize pay the bills. I had to sit down with this man and help him work out a budget, right down to $11 a month for a haircut, and show him he still had $600 a month left over. He didn't realize he could do it. I've had veterans that didn't know how to make a baked potato or cook corn on the cob. I stayed in their home and taught them. So sometimes, it's things that we don't think about that come common sense to us. One of the other programs I missed here when I was trying to come up with the VA's supportive housing is grant per diem housing. And all that is the VA paying a set number of dollars a day for an organization to provide housing. And the premier example of that in Northern Michigan is Patriot Place. You may have seen news stories on it. It's in Gaylord. It's a cul-de-sac with a half a dozen modular homes. And it is administrated by Goodwill Industries. We give them the funding. They provide housing up to 2 years. The veteran doesn't have to have any income, but if he has some, they sometimes will ask for up to 30% to contribute towards expenses. And while they're there, they'll help them get connected with any of the services they need, whether it's mental health, physical care with the VA. They need help with resumes, going out looking for a job. If they're able to work and want to work, they'll help them with that. For some, it's a matter of connecting them with other income sources that they weren't aware of. Veterans often aren't aware that they may be eligible for a veteran's pension. They aren't aware that some of the health issues they have, they can be compensated for. When it comes to the physical health issues, we refer them to what's called a veteran service officer. In town here, it's Dan Purge and Bill Stipek. Their office is right across the hall from the VA clinic, which is very convenient because I can often lead them right over there and explore, what those issues are and try to get that system going so that they can get that compensation. Another, the veteran's pension I mentioned is based on age, disability, and income. They just have to serve 1 day of active duty during a wartime period. Okay. They didn't have to be in combat. They just had to serve, for example, during the Vietnam era or one of the current conflicts. And if they fit the other criteria for disability or age, they can get a monthly stipend. Right now it's around, I want to say around $1,200, give or take a bit. And that alone could help them pay for an apartment. So a lot of times it's just getting them connected to the resources that are out there that they weren't aware of. Other times it's making sure, the mental health component is a big one. Some of the veterans I work with are wonderful renters. A gentleman housed locally, doing fine until Northern Strike came through. If you're familiar with Northern Strike, it's the once a year thing at the base here, where the different military units get together. Choppers started flying over his home. He had a PTSD incident and engaged in some dangerous behavior and lost his place to stay. I work a lot with veteran landlords when I can find them. Many times they're a bit more understanding with those issues and a lot more supportive. It's not to say that people should be allowed to engage in poor behavior. But if you can work through it, it's nice to be able to do so and keep them housed. The grant per diem in Gaylord is just one form. Other grant per diem programs include paying shelters to house veterans. The VA will contract with homeless shelters and pay them a set amount a day to be sure they have beds available for veterans. We used to have a contract here in Alpena, but they decided that they didn't want government funding and went a different route, and that's fine. We still utilize them, but they just don't get the government monies. We used to have a contract in Gaylord, but they closed their community shelter, unfortunately. So we still have contracts with shelters in Saginaw and Bay City. At times, late on a Friday afternoon, I'm off to one of the two to take a veteran there because it's the only place available. Sometimes we can use the short range hotel vouchers if something's not available here. Locally, once we go through NEMSCA, they often refer them to the supportive services for veteran families. And all three of us to get together. One gentleman recently this year, I worked late on a Friday along with Tracy, one of the NEMSCA people. The following Friday, the SSBF worker and I were working together, and I went to set up a tent with this guy. Salvation Army helped put him in a tent for a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's getting creative, having several agencies work together. As far as food needs, the St. Vincent de Paul is wonderful. I can call them on a Friday prior to a holiday weekend, late in the day, and get them in there for food. I refer them to NEMSCA's food programs. The Friendship Room here in Alpena, even though they don't normally have a food pantry, if it's late, I can't get a hold of other people, I call over there. Randy McCauley is terrific. He'll put together a couple of boxes of food for my veteran. Clothing, I get some things through the VA, military surplus. Other times I will utilize Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul, whatever's out there in the community. The VA can't do it all. One of the other offshoots of the Veterans Homeless Program is Veterans Justice Outreach. Often veterans who are homeless find themselves in trouble with the law, might be out of desperation, struggle with mental health issues, substance abuse, self-medicating for PTSD with alcohol or drugs is an issue. So what we try to do with that program is get involved, work with the courts, try to get the veteran into treatment if he's willing, he or she, and stop that cycle of being in and out of a jail cell. And most of them do quite well. One of the area programs that came from that is the Montmorency County Veterans Treatment Court. And I'm proud to say that while others have struggled, especially during COVID, some of the larger city courts, we've done well in maintaining our population, which is good and bad. You hate to see veterans in trouble, but you also have to have participants to keep the programs going. And that program's been going since 2015. And first veteran in that program, I've been trying for a year and a half to get help through one of the local county courts and trying to get him into a veterans court downstate. The time I was trying, we got the one in Montmorency up and running and made him my first client. And right now, I think we have probably 11. I know we got 2 more starting Wednesday. Up to over 12 or 13 people, excuse me. But the Veterans Treatment Court serves veterans in, they say, a 60-mile radius of county lines of Montmorency County. But if they can get there, we'll stretch that out. We take people from Emmett County, Sheboygan, Elkona, Presque Isle, Montmorency, and I'm missing somebody, but it's a very good program. Other times, if you can't find resources, you create your own. One of the pamphlets I got up here is for Northern Michigan Veterans Coalition. It's a nonprofit started by myself and about 6 other veterans back in 2015. And Michigan started its own Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency going back, I want to say, that was right around 2015, a little bit before that. And they chose one entity in each region of the state to be a hub to connect veterans to resources. They chose our organization. We're the only organization of that type that is able to give financial assistance. So at times, if it's difficult getting financial assistance rolling in a timely manner, we'll step in. Or if they've tried other avenues, we'll step in. We're fortunate that we've had businesses, churches be very generous with us. There's no administrative costs. None of us take any fees. We spend a few $100s a year on postage and promotional materials. That's about it. Everything else is volunteer. And we'll start out by trying to connect with area resources. If they are able to help, then we step in and do what we can. We bought everything from cars to refrigerators to wheelchair ramps. So feel free to take a card with you when you go. And you can get on Facebook too and look it up. Trying to think if there's anything I'm missing. I know I've gone over 10 minutes.
Find out about volunteers.
Although
How would I find out about how to volunteer?
well, if you're looking to volunteer for the VA, that's difficult. I don't have a good answer for that. It's been very hard to get them to bring in volunteers. I know on occasions they have. So much of it has to do with privacy concerns. We got new equipment for the lobby, these kiosks for veterans to check in. All of us old people struggle with the technology. Believe it or not, we're budding high school kids. We teach the veterans how to use it. So there's been occasions where we use volunteers. It's easier to volunteer for one of the nonprofits, pardon me, or NEMSCA, and again, it would be veteran specific with NEMSCA, but the veterans would still benefit from it. And that's why I've been involved with these other organizations. With the Homeless Awareness Walk, I did lead the local planning group for Michigan Coalition Against Homeless for a while, because by developing those relationships, it helps my veterans as well. So we're all in it together.
There is a home over toward I guess say in Petoskey, over by where the airport is.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of it right now.
That's taking over there and
Yes.
vacation.
Yeah, it's kind of a retreat, it's the recoup, right?
She gave away home for that. And I and some of our friends went on a scheduled weekend, and we did all the cooking for the veterans.
That's great. Yeah, it's a good organization. The name escapes me right now, but I am familiar with it. It's not VA affiliated, but veterans are told about it and they utilize it. So
They are utilizing.
right.
So I think they have target shooting and that, and I think they built little cabins for people who want to volunteer. They can stay there at the cabin that weekend while they're doing the cooking and helping.
Yeah. I know every now and then someone offers to volunteer to help with odds and ends with veteran needs, whether it's lawn care or fixing up their home. But it seems like when I have somebody offering, I don't have a veteran for it. Then when I have the veteran for it, that organization's not able to offer it because there are people who have moved on or what have you. Now and then things come together. I had one veteran that was very hard to house because he had several dogs, and 5 to be exact, and not small dogs. When a veteran tells you they'll live under a bridge before they'll get rid of their dog, they mean it. And I got lucky. Somebody called and offered me a large Jayco trailer.
All of you did through with that.
Yeah.
Oh, veterans. The home over there.
Mm-hmm. But some veterans, this particular veteran, he had a friend that let him use his property, and he's got this trailer set up. He's got it set up with solar energy supplies, and he's happy. He's no longer out in the cold. He lived winter before last in a tent, rather than give up his dogs. Many of them need them for support.
What is your own personal background there? Relative to this important activity?
Well, it's my second career. My first career was 25 and a half years with abused and delinquent kids. I used to be with the Huron House north of town. I was a group therapist there for over 20 years and the treatment coordinator for 20 of the 25. And I had done 6 years with the peacetime Army Guard. And I got out and I was working for a hospice organization, and the VA was looking for somebody with my credentials, and somebody I had known went to work for them and gave them my name. And honestly, I turned it down twice. They kept recruiting me and brought me in. And part of it was my experience in working with the delinquent population. I knew the courts. I knew how the courts worked. And most of my work is with the Veterans Justice Outreach end of things. So that was kind of why they wanted me, along with my master's degree in clinical social work. That's one strength of the Saginaw VAMC. They won't hire a social worker unless they have a master's degree. Other VA sites will hire bachelor's level, which I wish we would consider just because it's hard to get people. It really is. There's been times when I covered half this lower peninsula. I've got the record for the most miles on a VA vehicle, which is another thing I didn't mention is that for any elements of my programs I offer, the homeless program and the VJO, I can go to them. They don't have to come to me. I'm allowed to dress down a bit. So that I don't scare them by showing up too formal. My first VA car was a Malibu. They said, we don't care where you go, find them. I used to come back with brush in the grill. I had guys that lived off the grid since the Vietnam War. I hear rumors in a little community. This guy, he think he's a veteran. I pulled up with this guy in a 2-track. Took me a month to find him. He saw the VA license plate and he stood to attention. Been living in this 50s freighter camper since the Vietnam War. He used to drive his bicycle to Mackinac City or Carp Lake for groceries once in a while. He had an artesian well in a neighbor's property he got drinking water from. Did his clothes and his windows with pond water. And his house was, that little trailer with his windows were cleaner than mine at home. He hadn't been to a doctor since shortly after the Vietnam War. It took me 6 months to convince him to go to the VA clinic in Mackinac City. And it took him a while to make eye contact with people. He was that under-socialized at that point. So, you know, I guess once you start working with a population, it's a very appreciative population. And so I've stuck around. Veterans, by and large, struggle to take assistance. I've had people living in a tent, and I had to almost argue with them to take a couple little canisters of fuel for the little buddy heater to stay warm. Give it to the next veteran who needs it more, is what I hear. And I got to convince them that they are deserving of it. You know, this is the guy who did 2 tubers in Iraq. But that is a common theme. Give it to the next veteran. Somebody else needs it more than I do. Very seldom do you see somebody who's a grifter among the veteran crowd. I won't say they aren't out there. There's a rare case here or there, but they're very appreciative people. And I have to say, I'm working with more and more female vets. It's good. I had my first female veteran graduate from the Veterans Court within the last year. And it's a little different. You have to keep different supplies on hand. A little awkward discussing what their needs are sometimes, but you get through it. But that's my background. Any other questions? There's a lot of information up here. If you do statistics, I've got some stuff up here and the latest statistics, a little more explanation on programs. You're welcome to any. If I have business cards, I just got to take them out of my bag and put them up there. A little poem there. I don't know who the author is. It's called Chaplains Story. Helps put you in the mindset of a combat veteran coming back. People don't often understand them. It helps you understand kind of what they're going through. Common struggle for families when their son, brother, whoever comes back from war, is they don't understand, they don't want to be around them. It's not that they don't love the family anymore. When they're in the midst of combat, outside of survival, what are they thinking about? Their loved ones. The reverse happens when they come home. They're around their loved ones, it brings back memories of war. So, you know, if you have anybody that fits that category in your family and friends, keep that in mind. It's not that something wrong with you. It's just being around you sometimes brings up things. And, you know, people ask me, can I ask them what they experienced? Just let them know you're there if they want to talk about, but they don't have to. That's the first conversation I have with veterans is, do you want to share things with me? You can. I'm here. I'll listen. You don't have to. Some of them will share everything right off the bat. Most of them, it takes a while to develop that trust. A friend of mine passed Veterans Day, and I knew him over 20 years. It took him 10 years before he shared things with me. I knew him personally. It's not just what they see in war. It's sometimes what they have to do in war. You know, one of the veterans I worked with for 3 years, I remember the first day he told me about his first enemy kill, how morally destroying that was to him.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward 3 years later, we're in a car, and he brings up, Art, I don't know if I'm okay. I killed so many. I killed dozens. Whoops. And he says, I think towards the end, I started to like it. And I said, well, understand your human mind is not wired to take human life. It helps you survive by distancing from it. As long as you know you can't take people's lives now, you're okay. And he's okay. He's getting help, but they start to question themselves. I've had guys who were snipers who are afraid to die because they think they're going straight to hell. You know, it's a challenge for them. And that's what, that's why a lot of them do end up homeless, because they're coping with that. They can't deal with paperwork. They can't deal with even organizing or living in a house. We've had people we've housed and 6 months later they're on the street again. They can't handle that setting, that control. They got to be able to move. That's why they often end up transient. I had a guy show up in January one time on a motorcycle with a service dog in the back of a milk crate. It was a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But, and I did house him at Patriot Place. And he called me probably a month or two into it and said, I need more. I had to send him off to inpatient treatment. He recognized he needed more. That's great when they recognize that. It's like I said, it's hard for some of them. It's getting better. It used to be that, especially the male veterans, that male culture, don't cry, suck it up, you know. And the military isn't very helpful with it either. So we have to let them know sometimes it's okay to reach out for help. It's not a weakness. And I'm terrible if they have children. And if it's my only way, I'll bring it up. Take care of yourself so you can take care of them. Sometimes that's my go-to.
I get phone calls occasionally from, I don't know who it is, they say they're from the veterans, from the homeless veterans to support them. And I ask where are they calling from, they say Bay City. Does this money, is this somebody that legitimate or?
Well, I could tell you that nobody from the VA is going to call you and ask for money. There's a lot of scams out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of the nonprofits. That's why sure at ours, we don't take any none of us get salaries, you know. So many of these nonprofits out there, if you really do your research, you're lucky if 3 to 5% goes to the veteran. The rest is administrative fees, which translates into salaries, nice homes and cars that people running the organization. Check them out. There's so many scams out there. When people call, ask me who they should donate to, I tell them that locally is your best bet. Your VFW, DAV, if you got one, American Legion, they've all helped veterans. And if they want to go to the VA, we've got a homeless fund or a social work fund, but that's spread everywhere within our region. If they want to be a little closer to home, I'll mention the nonprofit out of Gaylord, which handles Northeast counties. So they want to keep it in Alpena, I recommend the county service office. That way you know where your money's going, you know, because we see veterans scammed all the time too. When it comes to housing, veterans will get calls. We're going to get you the housing. We need a deposit. Poof. Wasn't a legitimate agency. And it wasn't a legitimate landlord. Didn't even own the property. You know, there's so many scams out there. You know, refer them to this gal here. They're looking for housing. Or me, and I'll get them to her. She loves it when I call her on a Friday evening.
Yeah.
They used Barb's time and somebody else's time.
That's fine.
It's a big gift for not being here.
It's okay. My name is Vicki again, and I work with the Alpena Public Schools. I work as the McKinney Vento Homeless Liaison. for our school district, which also includes the ages of 0 to 26. So I also work with 5 other school districts. I work with AMA ESD, which covers the Great Start Ready programs, which is then what covers our ages of 0 to 5 before they're school aged, as well as our Pied Piper Opportunity Center, which may cover students up to the age of 26 if they have special ed requirements. I also work with Alpena, Atlanta, Alcona, and Hillman schools as well. I work with their homeless liaisons. So what I wanted to pass out to you guys is this trifold, and these are for you to keep. It has some resource numbers just in case you know or hear of any family members that might fall under this category of homelessness in the school district. So I'm going to be a little bit more simple, and I want to have a little bit of interaction with all of you. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and just blurt it out to me. So how do you define wealth? Anybody? How do you define wealth?
Spiritual.
Financial, spiritual. Well, one of the things, and when I was first hired, I've been doing this for 19 years. I was hired under Pat Timmons back at the old Aces Academy. And one of the first statements that was said from a student was, how do you define wealth? And it was hot water on demand. Think about that. Seriously, think about that. This school year alone, when I started school, and I've been working with McKinney Vento and homeless students for a long time, I had 7 families in tents, living in tents. And did you see the amount of tents that were at the fairgrounds? Several of my families contacted me ahead of time and told me that's where they were at. So talk about hot water on demand. Do they have it? No, but it's a priority for me in identifying if they have students, to get those students on this McKinney Vento homeless grant. There are things that we can do for them. And one of the things we talk about interconnectedness, we automatically, my first thing is to make sure, have you talked to NEMSCA? You know, have you been doing this? Have you worked with DHHS? Do you have a caseworker? That's part of my help in just getting them on the right path to getting some help back into some type of affordable housing. Also, my brother Joe Gentry is the director of United Way. And one of the things that, you know, being related to each other, and we talk about homeless needs, the United Way has been able to help several of our people who are individuals who are homeless to get into the Aplex where I used to work. And they get a monthly membership to go in and have a hot shower, you know, depending on what happens. So it's always on an individual case-to-case basis. I've been able to help people that are not in school as well, because they know I'm the homeless liaison for the school district, so they talk to me. And I don't care if they're in school or not. I try and get people help. And that's why we have the relationships that we do with everybody. I've worked with St. Vincent de Paul, it's been phenomenal. Salvation Army, you know, all of our different, my brother Joe and I cook at Sunday supper at Trinity Episcopal Church. So we also have the key. And if I know that there's a homeless family and we need help with food, Grace Lutheran's food pantry, as well as Trinity Episcopal's food pantry, is another resource that we utilize as well. So it's pretty cool to, you know, be connected with people. I call Randy. Randy's like, come on over and visit me. He goes, I'll hook you up. You know, it all depends. It's a matter of just getting people help when they need it and are at risk. So that was one question. Another question that I have for you is, what do you think of when you think of homelessness? What do you think? When you hear somebody's homeless, what do you think?
Not having a home.
Not having a home. What did you say? Poverty. Absolutely. Desperation. Yes. I've always had the comments from staff when I go at the, you know, welcome back to school meetings. I go out to Hillman and Atlanta and Alcona schools. And one of the things that they say is living under the bridges, sleeping in your cars. Absolutely. Those are ideal ways that you think of immediately. But to kind of take away that homelessness thought is there are a lot of different categories that would qualify families as homeless under the McKinney Vento law. And McKinney Vento is actually the one and only federal law that helps and protects the educational rights of students and children. And this law was actually enacted back in 1987. And I did not know that. When you look back at the history of how that began, it was actually under Reagan, and it actually was called the McKinney Vento Act back then. And it included kids who were in foster care. And it has changed its names over the time. It became the McKinney Vento federal law, became the McKinney Vento Homeless Act. It also became the No Child Left Behind Act. Have anybody heard of that one? And Every Student Succeeds Act. That is now what is the main federal law that McKinney Vento is under. They call it ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act. And since that has changed, foster care is now in its own entity under DHHS. They get their own special federal funding for them. So, but up until then, that we probably about 6 years ago, we did cover foster students. But I just wanted to give you a couple of ideas here for students who are homeless and their families. Our federal law is a little bit easier. Victoria kind of led to that earlier. We do not fall under HUD. HUD is very specific and is a little bit harsher under their rules. But under McKinney Vento, we can have families that are in the domestic violence shelter or the homeless shelter. And that's one reason why I wanted to have Barb here, because we do work hand in hand. I'm immediately contacted if the family that comes into the shelter has children, regardless if they're in school or not, but I help them get their kids enrolled in school. Transitional housing would be the kind of programs that Victoria, their program has at NEMSCA. So typically we do talk. Their caseworkers say, have you talked to Vicki? Are your kids in school? And if they are, then we usually try and send an email back and forth, and we communicate as well, just so that we know those kids are qualified and, they're getting the extra help that we can to meet educational needs for them as well. So, and those are in the families that are in the voucher programs that Victoria talked about. How many of you are grandparents? How many grandparents have housed their children and their children's children? Did you know that that would be considered a doubled up situation, and that those children can be qualified under McKinney Vento? Under the federal law of McKinney Vento, we can qualify them under the homeless grant to get them extra help educationally. So that's pretty interesting. And it's very fun to talk to this age group here, because I will tell you, one of the best programs that came out of understanding with our senior citizens is working with our senior citizen center downtown. They have developed a program called Kinship Care, and it's in multiple counties now. And it is financial assistance through them for grandparents who are helping to raise grandchildren.
What's it called again?
It's called Kinship Care. Yes. And I have flyers for the Montmorency counties as well as the Alpena County. But our Alpena Senior Citizen Center is a phenomenal resource. And they also, BJ and I worked together as well many years. My mother-in-law's Patty Densteadt. She's now moved to Chicago, if any of you remember her. So it's wonderful. It's about how connected we are to find out and get help. And that's really how that program started, was understanding there is a ton of seniors and a ton of grandparents in our community that are raising grandchildren right now. It's amazing. And then we have the motels and vouchers. Victoria's program works with that. So does yours, Art. And if a family is located in a house, in a hotel for a period of time, we automatically qualify those kids on the McKinney Vento grant. We've had so many fires already this year, and the snow hasn't even really hit. So we've had a ton of people who have been fired out of their homes or do not have access to running heat because they've had a wood stove fire outside of the house. So they have no heat available. So those kinds of families in those situations we are covered. Unsheltered, we actually have quite a few unsheltered families. And those are families that may be living in campers in somebody's driveway. We have quite a few of those here in Alpena in the city, as well as in the county. So that would be an unsheltered situation. Victoria, you kind of touched on that as well earlier, because typically those families do not have access to running water. They can go into a house that they're staying in the driveway with, but sometimes that's even limited, just so you know. And then we also have some unaccompanied youth. We have some of our juniors and seniors is typically what age group, but I see that at. Some of our children are raising their own parents. It may be addictive issues. It may be, you just never know. I try not to be judgmental in those situations. We have even some students who are within the LGBTQ plus population and cannot live within their home anymore. So, and those children are pretty smart. They know street smarts and they know how to get along, and they couch surf. I've heard that from you earlier, couch surfing. So we do cover those children under those categories under our federal grant. Some of the things that we do, we just, and I'm going to tell you right now, the money coming into our northern area is not a big grant. It's a federal grant, so it's not really huge, but we have about $50 per student that we can get needs, whether it's, diapers for the babies. We can do personal items of clothing, body wash, shampoos, all that kind of stuff. Typically our school success workers or myself take them shopping. So you may see me because we do that at Walmart a lot. So I may be taking my family shopping and they are so grateful. We do educational needs. We may be getting pens, all sorts of educational stuff that they might need. We help with medical referrals. That comes in where we work together. I also work with Compass North, which is an outreach of Child and Family Services and Catholic and Human Services as well, just to get counseling services, medical referrals, all of those kinds of things that we may take for granted. So anyway, it's pretty incredible. I will tell you for this year, we've been in school, 12, 13 weeks, Tom? About that. And currently right now today, I have 239 students on our grant just this year alone. 239, and 144 of those are in Alpena. Yeah. So it is pretty surprising. We think things are getting better. It's not necessarily getting better. But what we are doing here, and to have this panel here today, is about raising awareness and being able to connect people who need help to get them the help that they need. And, there's not always a perfect solution, but when we work together, there's a lot better plans to help people so that they can do the steps that are necessary to be successful.
God.
Pardon me?
God.
That is not part of my responsibility as far as the educational grant. My responsibility is to remove the stumbling blocks and the barriers that help kids from being successful in their school year. So that's typically what I do. But if the parents ask me things, I know the resources to send them to. And especially Michigan Works. I also work with Michigan Works as well. Especially for our juniors and seniors, there's some great programs with Michigan Works, and they help get kids jobs. So
One thing,
Disappear the malls,
yes,
young people with jobs, or a younger person, other than fast food places around here, where would they get a?
It's, I'm fortunate because I work out of ACES Academy, and our requirements at ACES are that the students are there 2 days a week. And then the half of the population comes on Monday, Wednesday, half comes on Tuesday, Thursday. And so that opens them up for additional employment. Last year, we were able to have the kids go to our school was taken actually to EGI with the whole, like the Kmart building, the Reacher and all of that. Yeah. I2P. Yeah. And so they have been able to go under and see the different branches that are fostered under their umbrella. And we actually had 2 or 3 students that actually got employed, and they followed the guidelines for employment. But it was actually pretty lovely to see that as an opportunity. Even though it may be a production line, but they're learning electronics, they're learning other things too. So it's pretty cool.
For veterans, the VA does have a voc rehab program. It's kind of limited up here because we're so rural, but they will try to help veterans get trained for jobs, whether it's looking into funding for college education or on-the-job training. We have a compensated work therapy for some that just need job skills. They go right down there and work at the hospital, and then they can kind of move on out to the civilian employment. So it's good. With the veterans I run into, keeping them employed, sometimes it's simple things. A lot of veterans with PTSD struggle with crowds. They struggle with people moving by them a lot. I've had guys working in factory situations on lathes, and their lathe is like in the middle of the road, and they got people walking behind them all the time. It's like, talk to your boss. You know, you don't have to tell them everything about your experience. Just tell them that you struggle, and you see if he can put you on a lathe with your back to the wall. And they've done that, and it's been successful. You know, when we're in the environment of war, danger comes from behind. Okay. When I meet a veteran for the first time, if I haven't met them yet, I'm going to meet them in a restaurant or in a courtroom. First place I'll look is for the wall, because that's where they're going to be. They're back to the wall. We're going to see the exits and see what's going on. So, you know, sometimes in that little thing that you do right there can help keep them employed and keep them housed. You know, sometimes it's going with them.
Right.
Yeah.
But I believe that handcuff
Mhm.
is so important.
Mhm.
That will make them see a way out of this situation.
Mhm.
Correct. And a lot of the times, you know, when we talk to our students and they're like, I don't want to work at McDonald's, you know, that seems to be like the only answer sometimes, you know, and but we also have had some great programs like Eric Peterson downtown is phenomenal with, you know, employing some of our students. And, you know, and it gives them an opportunity. If you can, there's quite a few students from the high school who have worked under him who have gone into culinary arts.
Mhm.
You know, and it's really just keep your ears open. And I'm grateful to always be able to talk to anybody about homelessness, especially students and families. The effects on our families are so, you know, difficult. And like Victoria was talking about, the evictions and things like that, that's mostly what I've been dealing with over the last probably month. It is a tough situation because the moratorium gets lifted. And for those who are, that's one reason why I asked about the at-will rentals, because that was my biggest evictions over the last 2 years in school. You know, they're at
The future of affordable housing here in Alpena. I thought we were going to talk a little bit about that today, about Iran.
that's,
Future of affordable.
yeah, that would be under Victoria.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we actually have created a Alpena Housing Task Force that we are currently doing a housing needs assessment. So we were able to collect donations and some funding from some entities in Alpena. So that's our first step, is we have to collect a housing needs assessment because developers are going to request that. So we have contracted with a company that is going to do that research for us, and that should be available at the end of February. And then we had our meeting 2 weeks ago, I think it was. Yes, a week ago. I'm not sure. Just recently, we had a developer come to the meeting that is putting up 150 units at the air base in Escoda. And so she scouted the city a little bit. And so we will provide her with our housing needs assessment when that's complete to see if she's interested in building housing here in Alpena for us.
Because actually companies directly had said we can't get people to come into our area because they don't have affordable housing or even housing. And I'm just wondering what plans are about that.
Yeah, that is definitely a need. So we do have the president of Mid-Michigan Medical Center on that council, as well as Alpena Community College. We have David Rabideau with Alpena Public Schools, because that is a very big need for our large employers. They don't have the housing for their staff to live here. We knew of a nurse that came up to work up in this area, and she was living in a camper because she couldn't find housing. Right. So homelessness happens to everyone because housing ends homelessness. So that is something that Alpena is definitely hyper focused on right now. So it'll take time, but we've already started building the ground base to address that. So it will come.
Place that, that burnt down, here, that. It's the, for the resale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wasn't there talk that they were gonna build something for affordable apartments?
Yes,
there?
that was approved and there's going to be a couple of units. The ground floor will be, there'll be office spaces. I'm not sure really what's going to go in there. And then the second floor will be housing.
Do you have any idea what kind of price will be charging?
I'm not sure, but I'm definitely going to be involved in that to make sure that it's something affordable. And then we do have the Bingham housing. I had met with someone last year that was interested in coming in there for senior housing. So I think that is up and going too, but you know, lots of red tape with those.
I once had a veteran in his 90s who needed housing. His home had burnt down. He lived in a hotel for a couple of years. His caveat was he didn't want to live near old people. He was a retired teacher. He wanted to be near young people. So able to find him a place in Onaway that had mixed population so he could see kids running around. And it's funny the things you run into sometimes.
So I thank you guys, all of you, for being a part of this. Yes.
The name of that organization or that facility over in Petoskey, it's the first road north of the Petoskey Airport, the Kelson Airport. Okay, Evan Road. Okay, if you go north past the airport, the very first road, make a left-hand turn and go west about 2 miles. It's called Ray Park.
There you go. Yeah.
It's just finally bubbled up to the
Ray
top.
Park.
There's another one called Freedom Ranch somewhere over in that neck of the woods too. I want to say maybe towards Travers.
But there's if you're out in the neck of the woods, you can go up and knock on the door, and even if you don't think there's anybody there, because it's an 8,000 square foot house, so you could,
Wow.
you could get lost.
Feedback I get on it is good. It's positive. And I get feedback from the veterans that have been there. So, you know.
And Jim Paskowski out in Hillman, at the Patchwood Plaza, it kind of sounds hokey, but Jim does a lot with the veterans also.
He's employed a couple of my veterans that need jobs.
Yeah, we know Jim and his wife person.
Yep.
And on Wednesday night, they have usually open mic at night out there, so on Wednesday between 6 and 8. And it's a free will offering, you know, making a little plug for somebody out there.
Yeah, he's offered use of his facilities in the past. I used to put on events called stand downs, which were events that brought in all the agencies that had resources for veterans. But I also had surplus goods there from the federal government. But it got to where that's where I could have used volunteers back then. It got to where I had to stop because of my health. I was unloading semi trucks by myself. But he offered to store things for me in the past. He was very supportive.
Thank
So
you very much.
Thank you.